Good evening. My name is Guion Foreman, President of the Chicago Police Board, and I am calling the board's May 20th public meeting to order. To protect the public's health in response to the COVID-19 outbreak and as permitted by Governor Pritzker's executive orders 2020-07 and 2021-09, this meeting is taking place remotely. This meeting is open to the public via audio conference and is being carried live by CAN TV. Those participating by phone are on mute in order to reduce background noise and disruptions. We have a court reporter making a transcript of this meeting. I will begin by taking attendance so it is clear who is participating in this meeting. Please say here after I read your name. Police Board Vice President Paula Wolf.
Here.
Police Board Member Matthew Crowell.
Here.
Police Board Member Michael Eady.
Here.
Police Board Member Steve Flores.
Here.
Police Board Member Jorge Montes.
Here.
Police Board Member Rhoda Sweeney.
Here.
Police Board Member Andrea Zopp.
Here.
Superintendent of Police David Brown.
Here.
Interim Chief Administrator of the Civilian Office of Police Accountability, Andrea Kirsten.
Here.
Deputy Inspector General for Public Safety, Deborah Witzberg.
Here.
I didn't see you. Hi, Deborah. General Counsel to the Superintendent, Dana O'Malley.
Here.
Chief of the Chicago Police Department's Office of Operations, Brian McDermott.
Here.
Deputy Chief of Chicago Police Department's Bureau of Detectives, Rahman Mohammed.
Here.
Executive Director of Police Board, Max Caproni.
Here.
We will now proceed to the items on the meeting agenda. We will have time at the end of the meeting for public comments. Once again, those participating by phone are currently on mute in order to reduce background noise and disruptions. When we get to the public comment portion of the meeting, we will unmute each speaker. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the board's April 15th regular public meeting?
Paula Wolf, so moved.
Michael Eady, second.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion passes. Our next regular public meeting will be Thursday, June 17th at 7:30 p.m. Whether this will be an in-person meeting or a remote meeting will be determined closer to the meeting date. As the city starts to open up, now very likely we could be in person. So for those attending remotely now, please continue to check the police board's website and we'll update that as we get a little bit closer. Is there a motion to close a series of executive sessions for the purposes of considering personnel matters and litigation as authorized by sections 2C1, 3, 4, and 11 of the Illinois Open Meetings Act?
So moved. Paula Wolf.
Second, Michael Eady.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. First up, we have a guest speaker. Professor Andrew Papachristos from Northwestern University will give us a presentation on the Chicago Neighborhood Policing Initiative. Andy.
So thank you for having me. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So please just bear with me as I do that. And then I will dive right in. So thank you for having me as a guest speaker today. Hopefully you only see one slide, which is the title slide. And I'm going to be reporting back today on a set of interim findings and series of recommendations that we just released from the Northwestern Neighborhood and Network Initiative N3 over at Northwestern University around the Chicago Neighborhood Policing Initiative, which I'm just going to refer to as CNPI or NPI. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with this model, basically it was launched sort of in 2019, the end of 2018, and it was a model of neighborhood policing, which was designed to change the way CPD approached sort of the ground level policing in communities. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about what it was, but the goal was to link officers directly with community residents to do problem solving literally in real time on the ground and to try to solve those problems outside of a traditional criminal justice framework. And so the model itself involved a new police role, which I'll talk about in a second, a new community role, and an idea of the co-production of public safety. And on the police side, it created a new police function, the District Coordinating Officer, or the DCO. The goal of the DCO was to stay within a police sector, to be assigned to a police sector for an extended period of time, a minimum of a year, to get to know and work that sector, to be off the radio, as it were, and to invest their time directly with the community liaison, which I'll talk about in a second. Beat officers were supposed to remain in their beats and work towards beat integrity, but the district coordinating officer, the DCO, was supposed to be the on-the-ground link, the person that was working with, understanding and soliciting feedback and working with community partners. And the idea was that this direct relationship between the DCO and community ambassadors in particular, which was the new community arm of this model, that they would problem solve together. The community ambassador, through this other side of the model called the community engagement model, would be the sort of representation from that local neighborhood, from that sector in particular. And they would work side by side and develop ways to problem solve on the ground with the DCO and the community ambassador. And that would be the key point of relationship for some sorts of problems, which I'll talk about in a second. But this actually emerged from a program in New York of the same name, of the Neighborhood Policing Initiative, but really tapped into one of the lessons we've learned both from policing and community safety and social science, this idea that the relationship between an officer and a civilian and a resident, that relationship is the key to repairing trust and building trust. And that if we build that trust, we can improve perceptions of the police, perceptions of government institutions, but also increase community safety. So this model was specifically designed to build that relationship through the DCO and this community engagement initiative, that link is the foundation for this model. As researchers and evaluators, we wanted to look at a bunch of different questions, and you're not going to be able to read all of these quickly, but the idea that we wanted to understand was over this period, which I'm going to explain to you, is did this program establish that infrastructure, that relationship? Was it able to do that? Did it impact how officers, but especially the DCOs, performed and experienced their roles? Did the officers feel different about the work that they were doing? And on top of that, did the residents of that community feel more trust in the police? Did they experience increases in returns to public safety? And did that lead to any reductions in crime, right? So our objective as evaluators was really to interrogate that, really to understand with this, building this relationship translate into the sort of public safety that we all hope it did. So what I'm going to briefly try to do in the next 10 minutes or so is talk about the rollout of the program, talk a little bit about the research that we did, and then give you our sort of lessons learned at this very crucial mark of the program, which is we're sort of entering its pilot phase. And as we already have heard, it's going to start to expand. So just briefly, for those of you that don't know the evolution of this program, it started in the 25th district on the west side in 2019, late 2018, early 2019, and expanded about a year and a half later to the 15th district. And since it's the police board and you know about these districts, you already know that there's, the 25th district is predominantly Latino and the 15th district is predominantly Black, and that they also vary a little bit in their sort of overall levels of violence and crime, with 15th district always sort of being one of the, having the highest levels of gun violence, and the 25th district kind of sitting right in the middle. So one largely Latino district, a large district, by the way, and one largely Black district is sort of where this program piloted, where it started, starting in the 25th and again, progressing to the 15th. Today, I'm going to be talking about both of these districts, but when I turn to the quantitative of the results, that did it have an impact on, we're still going to be focusing largely on the 25th districts. So an important point about how we approach this research, because we wanted to understand both its impact on outcomes like perceptions of safety, but also on the residents. What did the residents experience and the DCOs? We used what we're going to call a mixed methods bit of research. And importantly, we wanted to track the relationship. If the relationship between the police and the community is what the program is trying to understand, that's what we needed to get at. That's what we needed to understand. And so we actually conducted a series of interviews, about 90 interviews with over 60 officers over the last 3 years, almost 100 interviews with almost 40 community members. And we did this basically every 6 months. So we followed officers over time. We followed community residents over time. And the idea was to see how they were feeling as the program unfolded. We also conducted over 200 hours of observations, roll calls, trainings, community events, community ambassador meetings, all of the things that were going on related to this particular program, really trying to not just listen to what people are telling us, to observe what they were doing. So what people tell you isn't always what they do. And the goal is to try to triangulate that from our perspective. And we were granted some great access, both from community members and police, of course, to carry out this research. We're also going to present you some quantitative information, some quasi-experimental analysis that try to assess whether or not this program impacted trust and perceptions of safety, as well as crime rates and 911 calls. And that's where I'll kind of end. I do want to point out, I mean, we're talking about this now in 2021, but of course we started this research in 2019, in the end of 2018 and beginning of 2019. And when you look at when we conducted our interviews, this was already planned out before the world changed because of COVID and everything that happened in the summer of 2020. But our interviews were almost perfectly timed throughout these last year to track people's perceptions under some of the most unique conditions in my lifetime in this city and in this country. And so the data we have, the interviews we have, people's perceptions, not just of CPD and the DCOs, but the criminal justice system in our city, are really coming at a crucial time. So we're going to be learning a lot more about this over time. But I want to point out, it is important to put this in context. It's not just putting an asterisk by 2018. It's understanding what value we have from the things we learned during this point. So let me briefly talk about what we learned at baseline. Right? What did we learn when people were just starting this program? What were residents thinking? What were police officers thinking? I'm not going to, probably some of these things are going to sound familiar, but one of the biggest concerns from both citizens and police was this issue of responsiveness, right? Residents would talk about police were never there when you called them. Oftentimes there were too many cops there. And when they were there, they weren't policing the things you wanted them to police, right? So there was this multiple layered idea about responsiveness that community residents were perceiving from police. And this is a common sort of criticism of policing, but we also heard this there, right? And here's just a quote from one of the residents talking about, we're either policed too heavily or they're not around when we need them. From the police perspective, a lot of the officers really felt like people just didn't understand the way policing worked. They didn't understand the fact that there's a list of calls and they have to follow protocol and respond to calls in a certain fashion. So it wasn't that they were ignoring, or it wasn't that they were sort of didn't believe what the residents were telling them, but that there were constraints to police work. So there's this agreement that responsiveness is a problem, but a disagreement around what was going on. Probably one of the most fundamental things, and I won't go into too much detail, and I do want to implore you to read the report, which has dozens of quotes and experiences, was this idea that CPD and that police officers didn't invest in relationships with community members, right? That what community members expressed was, we want police to understand us. We want police to understand our problems. Diversity of both the police department, but as well as sort of other characteristics of the organization could get in the way. So if officers didn't speak the language, if officers didn't understand the culture or the history of the neighborhood, that just showed further lack of disinterest or disinvestment in the police. And again, as we've said, and as we've heard a lot in this city and in this country, this idea of levels of trust being at an all-time low. And of course, this initiative launched after the murder of Laquan McDonald. So the city was really sort of struggling with this, and we continue to sort of wrestle with this. Importantly, the west side of Chicago has its own unique history, which people remember. People remember dogs and fire hoses in the 1960s. People have this ingrained into how they understand the spaces they walk and what they feel and see. And this comes up in interviews as well, right? That this is our history of our community, and we want to acknowledge it, and we want to understand how we can move past this. And one of the key themes we heard from police and from community residents time and time again was that a respectful relationship between police and community is central to public safety. Residents want police to know, and some police and many police recognize this, that there are vibrant institutions in these communities that are doing public safety every day when they're not around. that they have a history of doing that. And that is really the rich social capital of the community that needs to be bolstered and amplified and worked into notions of public safety. So at the onset of this program, what we found was that the cops that were doing the work, the cops that signed up to be DCOs, the residents that were engaged and the residents that were less engaged, all sort of agreed that there were lots of things we needed to do. We needed to help improve trust. And the way to do that was through this fundamental relationship that had to be respectful, which was essentially what the program had hoped to do. So what did we see during this first year leading up to COVID? And as you can expect, COVID will be an important shift in sort of this program. But what we saw was that residents and police were actually quite excited about the gains they were seeing on the ground. And a year ago, before COVID, we released our first report that talked about this, that said people were definitely starting to see gains. Community residents were definitely starting to see gains to their investments. They're showing up to the meetings, they're going to the trainings, they're walking with cops, they're bringing problems to the officers. And I could give plenty of examples of what they did, including helping people get into treatment, helping local business owners, providing support around walking kids to school. There were plenty of examples that residents and police really said, this is what we were talking about, right? At the same time, however, we didn't see these effects spill over beyond those that were directly involved. So less engaged residents that weren't, say, community ambassadors, kind of still felt like their problems weren't being addressed or that they were sort of sitting on the outside. But by and large, we were starting to see positive gains in the sentiments that people were expressing to us over time, the people that were involved. The other thing that we saw, which is that officers that were doing this work in that first year were really excited about the work. For many of them, this was the reason they became police officers. This was the type of work they wanted to do, and they felt like they were starting to get a bit more recognition and space to do that. And that was also, from internal perspective, that was a big gain in the program. Even before COVID, there's a little bit of difficulties that were already starting to arise, which we started to document. One is that there was inconsistent CPD support and perceptions of what the program was, right? So on the one hand, it was not clear that, say, beat officers actually knew what DCOs were doing, right? And there was a lot of confusion with the program itself and CAPS, right? And every commander in every district has a slightly different variation on what CAPS is. But for these DCOs that were supposed to have a very specific task of partnering with a community ambassador and solving problems, this idea of messaging and support was already starting to come up early in the program, and making sure there were benefits to sort of becoming an investing in that if you were a DCO. On the community side, there was also a lot less investment, both in terms of times and resources, on the community ambassadors. We were asking essentially community volunteers to give their time and effort to spend with police officers, essentially training police officers in their neighborhood and community, and weren't receiving the same sort of support, right? And here's just one quote from a community ambassador. And they liked the community ambassador, they liked the DCOs. It wasn't a critique on the DCOs per se. It was more a critique on, we need more support and we're not getting it. The final challenge, even before COVID, and this is a problem that will become worse during COVID, was officers weren't getting, the DCOs were not getting the sort of time off of the calls or the support to work with the community ambassadors, that there was already experiencing turnover when there wasn't supposed to be turnover. They were already getting pulled off of DCO assignments to go work on other assignments. And that really took away from what they could invest into those relationships. In addition, because of this lack of recognition of the work or lack of recognition around the sort of returns to it, they felt like it wasn't valued as much. And so I'm going to make a quick transition to what happened during COVID and the summer of 2020. A lot of things, of course. And so I'll just kind of give you the high level bullet points, which is the restrictions, of course, had some setbacks to partnerships and engagements. A lot of this is based on face-to-face interactions, showing up, bringing someone in need to a particular center, whether it's a homeless shelter or services. But that was the link, the face-to-face, the interactions, the dynamics, the personalities. And it's essential to understand that even though it impeded the ability to make those relationships, both officers and community residents, they masked up, as they told us in the interview, and still did the work. Both of them, both community residents and the cops, they were out there doing the job, but it hindered their ability to connect, especially to connect with community. The impact of national events, we can spend time on this as you'd like, but it had a deep impact on the trust that was being built for both residents and cops. They worried this was going to destroy the relationship and all the work, that it wasn't just one step forward, and one step back. It was one step forward and 20 steps back. That there was a tension around both being upset about what was going on in the world and really also being upset because the DCOs were pulled from their neighborhood, right? They wanted the DCOs that were supposed to be in their neighborhood there, and they were often either being pulled downtown or they themselves got COVID. So the turnover and the staffing constraints, everything that happened in the summer of 2020 was felt very powerfully on the ground in these districts. And last but not least, of course, everyone's dealing with the gun violence spike in 2020, which has a very big impact on policing and the lives of neighborhood residents, but also pulled resources and pulled DCOs away into doing other sorts of things. And so I'll be very brief on this next part. But when we look to try to test whether or not CNPI had an impact on trusts and perceptions of public safety here, and I apologize, I know I'm running a little bit longer than anticipated. We've been analyzing the data on Elucid, the monthly surveys that have been going on in the city for some time that look at and measure trust in the police and perceptions of safety. This provides us a unique way to track these things over an extended period of time. And what we did was we created essentially a quasi experiment, a statistical test that said, did the start of MPI change perceptions of trust and safety? Did it change calls to 911? And did it change levels of crime or violence in those treatment districts, excuse me, relative to the rest of the city? And just when we look at these trends in the city itself, here's what we see. And this is important just to unpack this, because the punchline here is the districts that had NPI look just like the rest of the city. But when we look at, say, trust, which is the figure on the right here, what you see is levels of trust split by the racial composition of the police sector. We see that trust, when this started in 2017, leading up to the conviction of Jason Van Dyke, had basically started to plummet among Black Chicagoans and Hispanic Chicagoans, and then started to tick upward again after that conviction. But when COVID and the murder of George Floyd happened, we had again started to see the decline in trust, timing right along perfectly with these larger national events and local events, which is when NPI started, we essentially started to see small gains, but those gains then reversed. And without going into the details of the report, what our statistical analysis showed is that what happened in the 25th district after this, in these first 2 years, by and large, followed the rest of the trends in the city. So there was no discernible impact on these metrics based around the timing of NPI. The question, of course, is why? Maybe there weren't enough DCOs, maybe there wasn't enough investment. We really are trying to still understand that. Maybe it was because officers got pulled out and those relationships were jeopardized because of COVID. Maybe it was the spike in gun violence. Maybe it was the larger national trend because it wasn't just Chicago. We're still working on that. But what we saw was these early gains and promise in the programs really ended up just following the mirror of the citywide trends, possibly in large part because what happened in 2020. So in closing, we gave a series of recommendations, both for the policing side and the community side. And the policing side, we wanted to stress, like, look, this can't just be a set of trainings that people go to. This just can't be a sticker that gets put on a squad car or something that's checked off the box. The police that were involved, and more importantly, the community residents that were involved, believe that investing in that relationship, giving officers the time to do that, and having a consistent message and making sure that command staff and CPD understands that that is a valued, and not just valued, an elevated role is crucial. And there are lots of ways that could be done. On the community side, we hope that there will be some sort of investment in CEI, likely from a city agency or some sort of person that can coordinate this and to develop this role, that it has some level of authority and impact on the decisions that are made. And that there has to be a sustainable plan for operations that coordinate between the community and the police. So I've said a lot. I'll stop talking there. I apologize for going a little bit over. There's a lot more in the report, including the quotes from the DCOs and the community residents, as well as all the statistical analyses that kind of go along with that single figure I showed you. So thank you.
Thank you very much. This was wonderful. I definitely want to try to make sure that we have another opportunity to talk and ask some questions. I think it was some great lessons here that we can see for both sides, from the police side, from the community side. It's very obvious that this is the solutions are going to be, it's going to entail both community and police kind of working hand in hand. So the report is available on the police board's website, or Andy, if you want to give the website, your website.
I'll put it in the chat and then I'll go ahead and people can look at it, or just Google it and we'll find it.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. We really appreciate your time. Next up, a report of disciplinary actions taken by the board during the previous month has been made available on the board's website. There are several police discipline cases on this agenda this evening. The general orders and other directives issued by the superintendent during the previous month are posted on the police department's website. I'll now ask Superintendent Brown to give an oral report. And Superintendent, after your oral report, if there's any comments that you would like to make with Andy as it pertains to what the study we just heard about.
Great, thank you again. Just in the same vein as Andy's discussed with the DCO MPI program, I'm a big supporter of this program. We've expanded. I'm looking for data to inform us on, we've got back on track with building trust. Officers are really excited about it. We cannot be successful without building trust in the community. We've done quite a few things related to the consent decree I want to mention in a segue to changing the culture. Number one, we revised our search warrant policy, strengthening CPD's commitment to human dignity, respect, professionalism, and by improving our search warrant investigations and developing procedures. So in the coming days, we'll be releasing the final draft of the search warrant policy. We are also putting in a new foot pursuit policy that will be unveiled in the next few days as well. That policy obviously was something the mayor called for. I had implemented a foot pursuit policy while I was chief in Dallas in 2012. So I'm a big believer that foot pursuit policies can, number one, make our officers safer. They can also have better outcomes, making the offenders fleeing us safer and the community at large safer. So look for those two policies to be revealed here in the coming days. I want to also mention a significant increase in the program called custom notifications. Custom notifications are outlined as it relates to the consequences of continuing criminal behavior, and we offer individuals who can either be offenders or victims because they've made decisions to live a life of crime. We go to their homes, we knock on their door with social services, and we make available to them a list of services for them and their families to help deter them from continuing down a destructive path. So far this year, we made 290 custom notifications. We've gone door to door to 290 homes and made social service offerings to offenders and their families, compared with 38 over the same period in 2020. So we've had a 663% increase in custom notifications, and we're going to continue to make offerings to people who likely need services or their family needs services to change their behavior. We're starting a new pilot program also. Chicago PD is starting the new officer support system, which aims to identify and offer support to officers who may be at risk for adverse outcomes. And as I wrap up this policy discussion, since the consent decree's inception for the last 2 years, we created or revised over 111 policies, including use of force, hate crimes, and First Amendment. And as part of our ongoing accountability and reform efforts, we're beginning electronically publishing administrative summary reports as mandated by the consent decree. These reports, they summarize the department's investigations of alleged misconduct and can be reviewed on our accountability dashboard. And finally, just a few stats to close out. Our homicide clearance rates so far this year has been between 56% and 61%. That's a significant increase in clearance rates. Part of that reason is people are coming forward and giving us information, which really is kind of along the same lines as, when people trust you, they're likely to help you do your job. We've also recovered more than 4,000 guns so far this year. And each gun recovery, as many of you may know, is a potential deadly force encounter. And finally, we all know Sunday morning, 2 of our officers were shot. They are at home recovering, and the medical staff there at Mount Sinai expect them both to make a full recovery. But 108 Chicago police officers have been shot in the last 15 months. 108 officers shot in the last 15 months, with 16 officers shot during that period. It's an extraordinary increase. The increase last year when we ended 2020 was a 500% increase in officers shot, and we are outpacing those numbers from 2020 so far this year. So it's a very dangerous time to be a police officer. It's the most challenging time to be a police officer. But I will just add, in closing, our officers are rising to the occasion. They're dedicated and committed. I repeatedly emphasize we must embrace change. We must change our culture. But we also must, again, show our appreciation for our officers' sacrifice and all the hard work they put in into protecting the people of Chicago. So I'll close with that. And Andy, I owe you a coffee because I really want to pick your brain more on MPI and DCO and make sure if there's any barriers you're hearing about that we move them out of the way, because I'm just fully committed to this program. Officers in the DCO program are so excited to do the job that they hired on to do, which is they want to serve the community. So Andy, I'll coffee's on me whenever your calendar is free. I'll close with that. Back to you, Mr. President.
Thank you. That's wonderful. So Andy, police board members and Reverend Edie on the west side and Jorge, we have a couple of other people that we work closely with, some other volunteers from the Chatham area, and we'll also help along with those efforts along with CPD and making sure that we can get some good participation. Next up, it's my pleasure to introduce the interim chief administrator, Kirsten, the COPA Chief Administrator.
Thank you, President Foreman, for this opportunity to share. I want to first begin by saying I'm honored to serve the city of Chicago and its residents, both civilian and sworn. I consider it a privilege to have the opportunity to lead COPA at this very important moment for police reform in our country and specifically here in the city of Chicago. Like many of you, I view civilian oversight as a critical and important component of the broader police accountability system. Civilian oversight can help usher necessary reforms and serve as an instrument to advance the culture of policing. Perhaps most importantly, civilian oversight also gives voice to impacted communities and can help build trust in our systems of government. Part of my responsibility during my tenure at COPA over the last nearly 5 years has been to serve as a bridge to some of our external stakeholders, including Cook County State's Attorney's Office, the Cook County Public Defender's Office, the Federal Bureau of Investigations, U.S. Attorney's Office, and the Chicago Police Department. In my role as interim chief administrator, I will continue to serve as a bridge, but not only to those mentioned, but also to impacted people, their families, advocates, activists, and all who are connected to this work. When I first accepted this role, I said to the mayor, to COPA's staff, to our advisory council, and to a number of aldermen how important continuity is for COPA and Chicago's public safety system. Since COPA launched in 2017, there have certainly been challenges that we have faced, but the gains that we've made in our investigative processes and outcomes our transparency, and our community engagement have positioned COPA and Chicago to be the city that the nation looks to when we speak of true civilian oversight. That continuity and forward progress is the expectation that I and COPA as an agency want the residents of Chicago to have and to hold us accountable to. At COPA, we have some of the most talented and dedicated staff who understand the great responsibility that has been given to us. That's the responsibility to investigate allegations of excessive force, Fourth Amendment violations, verbal abuse, coercion, domestic violence, and sexual misconduct, as well as to investigate all officer-involved shootings and deaths. COPA will continue to meet this mandate. I intend to support our staff and to deliver to the residents of Chicago civilian oversight that you can trust to conduct fair and thorough investigations. Investigations that are built on our core values of integrity, transparency, independence, and timeliness. My commitment to you today is that we as an agency will continue to respond, to show up, to hear your complaints, to be transparent, to conclude our investigations, and to make crucial policy and disciplinary recommendations. I further commit to seeking ways to improve and refine COPA's performance in all of those important areas. And I will work to ensure that COPA is the civilian oversight agency that Chicago deserves and that our nation looks to as a model. And lastly, I would like to say thank you to Sydney Roberts for her service to COPA and also to the city of Chicago. Sydney came to COPA at a time of uncertainty and provided leadership that was necessary to both stabilize the agency and to fully commit us to our mission. COPA is truly thankful for her service. Now on to COPA's monthly updates. During the month of April for 2021, COPA received 460 complaints. 88 of those complaints were COPA's jurisdiction and investigations that we will retain here in our agency. And of those 88 investigations, 64% of them involved improper search and seizure allegations or Fourth Amendment violations. And in recent history or recent news coverage, a lot has been made of our caseload and the age of our cases. So I want to speak plainly about that. In April of 2021, COPA had 1,758 open cases. 37% of those cases, or 629 of them, are over 18 months old. We know as an agency we need to reduce those numbers, and we're already hard at work on the plan and securing the resources to make that a reality. In the month of April 2021, COPA also responded to the scene of 4 different officer-involved shootings, and those investigations are ongoing. Last month, we also concluded 88 different cases. And of the cases that included allegations of misconduct against officers, 50% of those were sustained. And then lastly, COPA closed in April of 2021, the high-profile investigation into the search warrant execution that occurred at Anjanette Young's home. COPA's investigation delved very specifically into all of the facts and circumstances surrounding what took place as officers executed that search warrant. Many of those events were recorded and captured on body-worn camera video footage, and that footage was shared widely throughout our city, our country, and even our world. In addition to that, COPA also looked very closely at the facts and circumstances leading to the acquisition of that search warrant, how it was that officers came to be in Ms. Young's home with that search warrant on the night in question. During the course of our 16-month investigation into this matter, COPA took 3 separate opportunities to write to the Chicago Police Department about potential policy and or training recommendations that were based on lessons learned from that investigation in order to help lend our voice to the ongoing conversations and reform efforts the department was undertaking in that vein. Our concluded investigation is currently with the Chicago Police Department, and we look forward to the superintendent's review and comment. Thank you so much for the time this evening.
Thank you very much. And again, welcome. And yes, thank you for that reminder. Thank you very much to the efforts of Sydney. We worked very closely with Sydney over the last several years, and so she would definitely be missed. I'm now going to move to the disciplinary cases. We have a few cases up tonight. The police board, as authorized by the Open Meetings Act, has considered in a closed meeting 2 police disciplinary cases. The board will now take final action on these cases. Regarding case number 20-PB2972, is there a motion to find police officer Paulzel Gauze not guilty of making a false statement regarding his use of force and to restore him to his position?
This is Matthew Crowell, so moved.
Steve Flores, second.
I will now call on members of the board for their votes. Wolf,
Opposed.
Crowell,
Aye.
Edie,
Opposed.
Flores,
Aye.
Montez,
Aye.
Sweeney,
Aye.
Zop,
Aye.
and I vote against the motion. Voting in favor are board members Crowell, Flores, Montez, Sweeney, and Zop. Voting against the motion are board members Wolf, Edie, and myself. The motion passes by a vote of 5-3. Is there a motion to adopt the written findings and decisions and dissent that have all been reviewed by all board members who participated in this case?
This is Matthew Crowell. So moved.
Steve Flores, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed?
Yes. Oh, sorry. Aye.
Yeah.
Yeah, got it.
Oh, any opposed?
It's been a long day.
The motion passes. Regarding case number 21PB 2992-2, the superintendent filed charges against police officer Michael Milichik, recommending that he be discharged from the Chicago Police Department for making a false report. The superintendent subsequently moved to withdraw these charges because Milichik resigned his position with CPD. Is there a motion to grant the superintendent's motion?
So moved, Paula Wolf.
Second, Michael Eady.
I will now call on members of the boards for their votes. Wolf,
Aye.
Crowell,
Aye.
Edie,
Aye.
Flores,
Aye.
Montez,
Aye.
Sweeney,
Aye.
Zop,
Aye.
and I vote in favor of the motion. Voting in favor are board members Wolf, Crowell, Edie, Flores, Montez, Sweeney, Zop, and myself. The motion passes by a vote of 8-0. The written findings and in the cases on which the board took final action this evening will be entered as of today's date, sent to the parties, then posted on the board's website. There are 2 additional disciplinary matters to announce this evening. Board members Sweeney and Wolf will make these announcements.
Did I go first?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Pursuant to Section 2-78-130 of the Municipal Code of Chicago, I considered one matter on which the Chief Administrator of the Civilian Office of Police Accountability and the Superintendent of Police did not agree regarding the discipline of 2 officers. In request for review number 21-04 and 05, Chief Administrator Roberts recommended that Lieutenant Augustin Salgado be suspended for 90 days for using excessive force and other misconduct on May 31st, 2020, and recommended that Commander Chris Papaioannou be suspended for 7 days for failing to complete a report on this use of force. Superintendent Brown recommended less discipline for both officers. After considering this matter, it is my opinion that the superintendent did not meet the burden of overcoming the chief administrator's recommendation for discipline. A copy of the written opinion will be posted on the board's website as required by the municipal code.
Thank you.
And I considered one matter under, excuse me, on which the Chief Administrator of the Civilian Office of Police Accountability and the Superintendent of Police did not agree regarding the discipline of 6 officers. In request for review numbers 21-06 through 11, Chief Administrator Roberts recommended that Field Training Officer Mark Johnson be discharged from the Chicago Police Department and recommended that officers Lawrence Kerr, Timothy Mason, Lauren Holt, Pierre Williams, and Sergeant Alma Price be suspended for misconduct during an incident involving Bernard Kirsch on November 28, 2019, near a bus stop at the corner of 79th and Cottage Grove. Superintendent Brown disagreed with certain findings and recommended less discipline for the 6 officers. After considering this matter, it is my opinion that the superintendent did not meet the burden of proof of overcoming the chief administrator's recommendations for discipline. Copy of the written opinion will be posted on the board's website as required by the municipal code.
Thank you very much. As we move to the public comment section of the meeting, I would like to remind everyone of the board's policy on participation at these meetings. We value your comments and questions on police-related matters, and we will treat you with courtesy and respect. We expect all members of the public to treat everyone at this meeting in a similar manner. I will now call upon members of the public who signed up in advance to speak. Each speaker will be unmuted after I call his or her name. Max, is there something that callers will need to do to unmute?
Yes, the callers can press *6 on their phones and they'll be unmuted. So they can control themselves and be unmuted.
Okay, wonderful. Our first speaker, Zakia Muhammad.
Thank you very much. Good evening. Can everyone hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Maybe I'll come off the speaker. I would like, I have three concerns, and it's about COPA, Civilian Office of Police Accountability, and it's supposed to represent transparency or bring about transparency. I would like for someone on the police board or the police superintendent to, number one, give me a rundown on COPA's investigation on those 12 policemen who illegally raided and searched Antoinette Young's home for 45 minutes with their guns drawn as she stood naked screaming, "You have the wrong house." Number two, since 2019, COPA has been investigating Mr. George Blakemore's case, a 77-year-old activist that was brutalized by a Chicago policeman at a planning and development meeting in City Hall. Now, the results of this mishandling of the 77-year-old Mr. Blakemore caused him to have brain surgery from the blow to his head caused by the policeman. What is the rundown on that case? Finally, that 2 or 3 white police who beat Mr. Gary Allen Foreman, who is the president of the police board, what's the rundown on this case, on these white policemen? Only and only when police are charged for these kind of cases will there be trust rebuild in our community. Only when that happens will there be trust rebuild in the communities, because now we are charging genocide on this system of racism and white supremacy. Please, someone, can you answer those 3 concerns for me tonight?
I can answer this. I think that COPA chief just reported that they just wrapped up the Antoinette Young investigation. The other investigations certainly are still open, so I'm pretty sure that you can't comment. Is that accurate, Chief? That's accurate. I can certainly report on mine. I never said if the officer who hit me was white, Latino, Native American, Asian, Black. I never said anything like that. And so that's definitely still being investigated. But I don't think that we should make this about a white police officer, something like that. This is about police officers and some of the actions that COPA is recommending. All of these things are still open, but as it relates to me, I can definitely say that, and that race is a completely separate issue.
So you saying they wrapped up Antoinette's case?
Yes, Chief, would you like to speak to that?
Sure, thank you for the time. Yes, we did conclude that investigation last month in April, and it's currently with the Chicago Police Department
Can I just
for their review, and then they comment on our. That's part of the way the system works, and that's the stage in the process that case is in right now.
Thank you. Our next speaker, Robert McKay. Robert McKay. Next speaker, Jennifer Edwards.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Tonight we'll report on an upcoming event and stats from our first and second walks in our area. Our third area business walk is scheduled for June 4th, 2021, beginning at 9:30 a.m. Community group members from several organizations will convene at 72nd and State Street and proceed to 69th and State and continue from 71st and State to 71st in Indiana. One team will be with the first group, one team will be with the second. We will organize in teams walking with city agencies as we conduct our observations. The purpose of this walk is to make sure that the businesses in our communities are in compliance with city, county, and state licensing requirements and to identify the owners and their agents responsible for the day-to-day operation of those businesses. We recognize that crime has occurred at or around some of the businesses in our area. It is also meant to show a partnership between the community and the governmental agencies responsible for the health and safety of the residents there. We have contacted and are asking for the assistance of CPD, BACP, Streets and Sands, the Department of Buildings, CFD, Cook County Sheriff officers, and the Board of Health. As of today, we have not heard from the Department of Public Health and the Department of Buildings. We request your assistance and have included 2 emails to Marlene Hopkins of the Department of Buildings. We'll send that to you. We hope you can assist us in this endeavor. A few stats from our first 2 walks. 14% of our observations showed cleanliness problems, 24% signs covered windows and building issues, 14 to 20% engaged with the trespassing affidavits. Illegal activity was observed, but businesses closed up when they saw us and the people scattered. We thank you for your help in connecting our community with the Chicago Police Department.
Thank you, Ms. Edwards. If you get the information to me, I will be sure to connect with the building departments and streets and sanitation.
Okay, thank you.
Next speaker, Eunice Chapman Regis.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Good evening.
Okay. Good evening again. I thank you for your concern for our issues, but we still have problems in Chatham. 79th Everhart Block Club members and other members have been calling 911. Family Fresh Market at 457 East 79th Street is still a problem. There was another loader yesterday parked his motorcycle on the curb outside the store, and there are loaders outside the store and it's on the corner. The business owner has already signed no trespassing affidavit. There's security personnel inside, but it continues to harbor these people, and most of them don't live in the neighborhood and promote illegal activities. April 2021, another community walk was conducted, included Cal, our block club, 6th District, Monica Hughes, the sergeant, and members of her CAPS team, 4 representatives from BACP, some members of the Cook County Sheriff's Department, and other concerned Chatham residents. The walk started at Bacon Lot of 79th in Maryland, continued on westward on 79th Street to Cottage, and we introduced ourselves to the businesses, informed them of the city ordinances, and they are not supposed to cover windows, and some signed no trespassing affidavit. And 457 was East 79th Street was visited again. Last week, Deputy Chief Snelling of Area 2 called me to inform me that he will be talking to Commander Ben of 6th District, and perhaps a patrol car can be temporarily stationed at 79th and Everhart. That corner is a haven of gathering point of freewheeling illegal behavior. He encouraged us to keep making calls to 911. There's a problem at 430 through 432 East 80th Street between Everhart and Vernon. There's an apartment building that has been found to have prostitution and drugs. They have a police raid there, but the people left, they knew about it. As soon as the police left, they came back. We need help.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, Matt Brandon.
Good evening, President Foreman, Superintendent Brown, members of the board, and members of the community. This is just a thank you, particularly to Superintendent Brown. Your police department continues to assist us here in 3 and 6. We want to expand it to 4, 5, and 7. But hats off to Deputy Snelling and Tally, Commanders Watson and Ben, the CAP teams. And we're working well together. We're expanding the work that we do. And they're always only a phone call away. Hats off to you, Superintendent. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, John Perryman.
Good evening, Mr. Foreman. This is the 1-year anniversary of me bringing this issue, so I'd like to respectfully ask for 1 extra minute to speak. Mr. Foreman, I'm respectfully asking. 1 minute.
I'll let you go a little bit over.
All right, my name is John Perryman, and I'm here once again to ask for help regarding a large drug market on the west side, which is rendering our one large park unusable and creating an increasingly dangerous situation. I actually brought this concern up at a police board meeting 1 year ago, last May, and you said, Superintendent, and I'm quoting, "We have some things in the works and I think you will be well pleased." Well, here we are, and I think it goes without saying that I'm not well pleased. The corner's as bad as ever, if not worse, than it was when I first brought this issue to the commander of the 11th District last March. Superintendent, I've met with you twice. I've met with the new commander and the deputy chief, along with the Commander Brown of the narcotics unit. And now the drug market is larger. For the past 4 months, I've been told that something big is going to happen. It's going to help. Just today, Deputy Chief Cato told me that something is coming soon. I don't believe him. It's been a year. I refuse to be strung along anymore. It's not fair to our community. I've also reached out to Vance Henry in the mayor's office, and he told me that the mayor's office would help. I have not heard from Mr. Henry or the mayor's office in the past 2 months. You actually placed a squad car in the corner at one point. The drug dealers moved down about 100 feet away from the squad car and carried on with business as usual. The uniformed officer couldn't be bothered to even turn his head to see things had moved and then move his car. The damage to the community has grown and grown over this time. Guns have been purchased with the money earned on this corner. Children have been recruited by the gangs over this time. Storefronts have remained empty because no legitimate business can exist in this space. I hope that everyone who hears me month after month talk about this same specific issue is starting to understand that something is fundamentally wrong with the policing in our community. Small problems are allowed to fester and grow until the police can't stop them, even if they are trying. I'm almost done. We are having a crisis of leadership. You've delegated to Commander McKenzie and Deputy Chief Cato, but they couldn't improve the situation. They won't even own their own failure. So here's my ask to you. Can you please take some time tomorrow morning to pick up the phone and make something happen? You are the top cop in Chicago. It is becoming obvious that you are the only person who can help at this point. Your commanders and deputy chiefs need to see you showing by example how you can use your position and expertise to help a neglected part of our city. So is that something you can do tomorrow morning, Superintendent?
I don't know. Green, you want me to go ahead and answer?
Yeah, sure.
Sure.
Yes,
So,
yes, please.
okay, Mr. Perriman, I had a report sent to me today regarding what's happened in the area you've identified, the park area where the open air drug sales have been occurring. This is the report. I'm just going to read it out. There has been no shootings or homicides in this area, no robberies. There have been 9 arrests. There have been 4 guns recovered, and the officers have conducted investigative and traffic stops at a very high level in the area as well. There has been 4 shot spotter alerts there, but again, there's been 4 guns recovered as a result of their response. And the narcotics division has made arrests as well through several operations. Again, we can always do more, but you're likely one of the few areas on the west side that's had 0 shootings and 0 homicides and no robberies within the last 30 days. We'll continue to do more and work the area because I do understand how pervasive open air drug sales are. It's really the demand for drugs that's driving what you complain about, not necessarily the inaction of the police officers. So the demand for drugs are high on the west side, as we all know. But
if I can respond to that specifically, it's so easy to buy drugs.
Sir.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Superintendent.
Yeah, just in the April time.
It's so easy to buy.
Okay. Well, I'll just stop there again. But pretty good outcomes that the commander and the area Deputy Chief Cato sent to me regarding the area we focused on.
All right. Thank you very much. Mr. Perryman, we have to move on. One of the things that, as we've talked privately, this is a challenge, not just for your block. This is a challenge that impacts the entire city. You hear month after month a group from Chatham speak about some of the challenges that they have. I can introduce you to them. You can hear about some of the things that they're trying if you would like, but we don't have a lot of time to go back and forth with the superintendent today. Next speaker, Flora Suttle. Ms. Suttle. If you could press *6, Ms. Suttle. Okay, I'll try you again, Ms. Suttle, if you're still there. Next speaker, Mr. George Blakemore. Mr. Blakemore, welcome. We've missed you. Mr. Blakemore, if you can press *6. I don't even think you were muted. Mr. Blakemore. Mr. Blakemore.
This is Miss Suttle. When you're ready, I'll unmute.
Okay. All right, Miss Suttle, go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, Superintendent, members of the Police Board, and the new Chief Administrator of COPA. I really appreciate your report on the statistics of what COPA has been doing and the transparency in that. But as always, I'm calling because my son, Derek Suttle, was killed on February 11th, 2012, by an off-duty Chicago police officer who was in uniform. And I've requested since 2016 that COPA reopen this case. I've submitted information, and I have not heard anything back from COPA, your predecessor. And so I'd like to know the status of my request to reopen on that case. And I'd also like for the Deputy Inspector General of Public Safety, Deborah Weepsburg, to comment if she has something to add on the reopening of Derek Suttle's case. And to end this, I'd like to thank the 2nd District 3rd Watch for the outstanding service that they provided to me and my family last night. They were a desk crew. I don't remember everybody's name, but I know 2 of them were from class 98-4. Thank you very much. That's it.
Chief, would you like to respond?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Suttle, for your patience as I'm coming up to speed on what the request is pending for. I know that we recently received some additional information, some of which did come by way of the Inspector General's office. So we thank Deputy Public Safety Inspector General, Ms. Whitsburg, for that. And that's under review. I look forward to the opportunity for you and I to have further conversation about this. And as always, I know that you know how to reach Ethan Edie, our Public Information Officer. So I would encourage you to go through him as well to facilitate some of those conversations. But we are making this a top priority to get you some resolution on your pending request.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much.
Ms.
I think
Whitsburg.
I'm kind of muffled, but thank you very much.
Anything would you like to add, Ms. Whitsburg?
Just to say that, as Chief Kirsten mentioned, our recommendation is pending with COPA. We're awaiting a response from COPA.
Okay. All right. Appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. George Blakemore. Mr. Blakemore. Your phone is not muted, so if you can hear me, you can just start speaking. All right, we will move past Mr. Blakemore. Next speaker, Mr. Robert Moore. Mr. Robert Moore.
Hello. Mr. Foreman, can you hear me?
Yes.
I don't know. I gotta turn this. I guess I gotta turn this up.
Mr. Moore, you have to turn off one of your two devices. One of the two devices, you have to turn it off.
All right, Mr. Foreman, am I ready to go?
Yes, sir.
All right. Material which Robert J. Moore cannot get into this meeting tonight may or may not be posted in the Institute of St. Michael the Archangel website, whose URL is jn21-15 protctr.tripod.com, and or the Robert Moore with Weathered Law Book page image YouTube channel, because the objective of all this is to control the presentation of the state of mind of the chief policymaker of this policing entity. That's priority number one. That Robert J. Moore understands is still got to collect hundreds of thousands of dollars in various causes of action against the city of Chicago, and to get criminal convictions of the perpetrators of official misconduct and all kinds of violations of 18 U.S.C. 242, 241, 1346. It's been a dreadful 20 years with the city of Chicago corruption and criminality. Regarding Jason Van Dyke, 16 shots at a fleeing suspect murder, the charges should be instituted on 18 U.S.C. 242 and pursue the death penalty. 16 shots, this guy got a slap on the wrist. He's going to be back out here in like 3 or 4 years. That's ridiculous. There's no statute of limitations given what Logan McDonald died as a consequence of the constitutional deprivation. So there's no justification. I don't have time. I got to fight Lucifer at the top, okay, to deal with all these individual cases, but there are wrongs on top of wrongs on top of wrongs. Now, the biggest problem is there's a blue whale-sized crocodile in the only watering hole that exists on the Serengeti, okay? That's it. It's 10 families who do not believe that non-Jews are human beings. That's it. They push the buttons and pull the strings. Everything else, the puppets move off of this. That the problems in Englewood were produced by these same individuals. Read Clower Pivens. They produced in 1960, there were fewer black broken families than there are white broken families. This is all
Sorry, Mr. Moore, your time is up. Mr. Blakemore, I'm gonna give it one more shot. Mr. Blakemore, George Blakemore. If you can press *6 to unmute, Mr. Blakemore. Okay. At this time, all members of the public who signed up to speak have been called. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Paula Wolf.
Second, Michael Eady.
The motion passes and the meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thank
you.